This is a crusty old hard drive. This is an early IDE drive that is kind of a pain to read. Hard drives like this came out in an era where you'd have to configure your cylinders, heads, and sectors in your motherboard BIOS to be able to use the drive. As such, drives like these are kind of a pain in the butt to try and image for archiving. And doing this has been annoying because you'd have to take an old motherboard, set it up with the correct BIOS parameters to connect the drive, get software running on that motherboard to be able to read the drive, and then exfiltrate an image somehow using maybe networking or a CH375, and it just kind of sucks. And as a result, I, and probably many other people, have been putting this off for a long time. This is not all of my drives that fit this bill. Matter of fact, not even all of these fit this bill. This is just a selection of drives that I have that are very old, because today I'm going to be trying to read this drive using the ATAboy. This is a product that was sent to me by JJ Dasher, who makes this and sells these at his website, Obsolete Tech. Now, JJ reached out to send this to me because there hasn't been a lot of coverage, and I hadn't actually heard of this before, so I was pretty interested in this. Now, there is one thing I need to mention before we continue here, and I didn't realize this until after it was sent to me, and I mentioned to some people that I was going to take a look at this in a video, and that is that this was designed using AI. Now, I am not a fan of generative AI and don't really like its usage in product development situations like this, but again, I did not know that beforehand, and it is disclosed on the GitHub repo. I have personally not used any AI tools, so I couldn't look at the code and tell you what is or isn't AI stuff, and actually, before I started filming this today, I went to the GitHub repository and tried to look at some of the stuff, but I got blocked by GitHub because we're in such an AI nightmare that they are apparently rate limiting people who aren't signed in so that they don't get their website scraped. So welcome to our glorious AI-driven future. Now, as far as the ATAboy here, since I already have it and it's already here, I'm going to set aside the AI stuff and just try to be as unbiased as possible and review it as is. I brought as many vintage drives home as I possibly can to try and pit it up against. One thing that I was warned about is it's not as great with larger, newer drives, and I do have some of those in there. Like, this is a 40 gig drive. I'm probably going to sort these by capacity and do all of the larger ones last. I also have a couple of for giggles drives in here just to see how it does, but the main goal is to try and image older drives. Now, one thing I will point out that I was actually curious about, this cannot currently image XTA drives. I have a Tandy RL 1000 HD that has an XTA hard drive in it, and I was curious if it could do that. It cannot, but they are interested in adding support for that. So that may come out later. Again, I don't know about how, but that's everything I know at this point. So from here, I have a lot of work to do. I'm going to set up the software for this, and I'm just going to try it with as many drives as I can, and then I'm going to report back after, because frankly, there's just going to be a lot of time and trial and error in this, I suspect. So I'll get back to you once I have gone through as many drives as I can. Okay, it is about a week later now, and I have had a lot more seat time with the ATAboy, and I fully understand what it is like to use and what it can do now. But before we continue, I think I should demonstrate something to you. And instead of starting with the ATAboy here, let's start with a generic off-the-shelf USB IDE converter here. So this device has multiple connections: SATA, mini IDE, and the full-size desktop IDE. This is just some random nonsense that I got off Amazon and really isn't all that special. So I'm going to connect this drive to my computer here through this adapter. I have this piece of ESD foam so that I can isolate it from vibrations. Turn on the power supply, and the drive is spinning up. Now I have this connected to my computer, but if I try and check which disks are connected here, nothing shows up. That's because this kind of IDE controller has no way of addressing this vintage of a drive. Now that's not because this doesn't work. I can take this drive out and grab a much newer drive, like say this 250 gig Western Digital drive, plug this in, turn it back on, and this one, it reads just fine. There's nothing wrong with the adapter, but there's also nothing wrong with this drive. This kind of adapter just straight up isn't compatible with these kinds of drives because these lack LBA, and we can see that in the ATAboy's menu. So let's swap out everything here and take a look at what the ATAboy can do with this drive. Now, the first thing you're going to notice is that it doesn't plug in, and I do think that perhaps a right angle IDE adapter could be offered for this, just something that's PCB flat here with a right angle one there. It'd be pretty simple, but I actually do like the idea of it having the male connectors like the motherboard here, and then having a cable that you can plug into. Because while imaging a loose drive like this would probably be easier if I could just plug this directly in the back here, if you have a system that has hard drives in it and you want to be able to image those, you can just unplug the cable from the motherboard, plug it into this, and then turn the power on to the power supply, and then have your USB cable go off into your imaging system. And that is a whole lot more convenient. And convenience is kind of the name of the game here. This thing is extremely convenient to use. So first, let me go ahead and plug this in here. And I'll also take a moment to do a little show off thing. If you're working with IDE cables a lot, in particular one cable, slide a piece of packing tape underneath the little plastic thing there, because then you have something that you can pull on to unplug the cable that isn't the ribbon cable, which is a lot nicer on the cable in the long run. All right. Now, the ATAboy is not a complete solution for imaging drives because you are also going to need some kind of power supply. This is just some random generic and a little scary amp mate and lock or Molex power connector thing here, but I have an external power switch that I can just hit. The light turns green and then it has power. So I'm just going to plug this into the drive. And then I'm going to plug the ATAboy into USB here. I actually ended up talking with JJ Dasher about the directions for this because initially the GitHub repository said to turn this on, then plug it in, and then plug in USB. But I actually found a little quirk with that was not the best solution. So now the idea is to plug everything in, plug this into the computer to power it, and then go ahead and power the drive itself. All right, now with that all connected, I can show you how the ATAboy works, because this is actually a USB serial device, which I was not expecting. This is one of the coolest ways to configure a device for random miscellaneous use cases like this I have ever seen. You do not need any software installed on your computer to use the ATAboy. You don't need to download any scripts. You don't need anything other than a serial terminal. All of the configuration and software is contained within it and can be set from the terminal, which is fantastic. And here is where the magic of this is. Now, the other drive adapter was not able to read this drive, but on the ATAboy, we can run auto detect and set geometry, and then it will automatically see that this is a Connor 85 megabyte CP384E, which we can see printed right here on the label. Now, down below, it's even more impressive because this drive doesn't actually have the CHS parameters printed anywhere on it, which really sucks if you don't know how to configure it. But the ATAboy is able to automatically identify it and figure that out, which is really awesome. Now, if you've ever set up drives on motherboards back in the 386 time, you may have actually seen hard drive types before, and those also specify the cylinders, heads, and sectors. I don't think the ATAboy supports type parameters, but hopefully you will never need those. And For the most part, they're kind of dumb anyway, and you can just look up a table of them if you really need. But that's just something that I haven't seen on this. Now, the other thing here is I don't know if there's any meaningful difference between normal and large. I have not seen a drive behave differently picking those, but I'm just going to go ahead and pick large. Now, below large, we can see that this actually can read LBA drives like that 250 gig drive, but you wouldn't want to, and I'll show you why in a moment. But for now, I'm just going to pick large, and then I'm going to go over to mount HDD to USB mass storage. While this device is connected over serial still, it is also going to present as a USB mass storage device, which will give us access to the drive. This thing just straight up presents it as a USB mass storage drive, which is absolutely fantastic, which means that unlike before where we couldn't read this drive with F-disk, we should now be able to, in theory, see it. I think plugging in that other hard drive adapter may have messed with this, and that I now have G as my drive parameter for this. Yes, that's what's going on. But with the ATAboy connecting this drive, we are now imaging it. Now, critically, this is where the ATAboy is incredibly useful. I'm able to use DD Rescue. This is a much better modern imaging tool that will be able to go back and forth different directions and do multiple passes of trying to read a drive to try and get as much data off of it as possible. In the background here, I'm actually running DD Rescue View, which can take the map file that DD Rescue generates and represent all of the data that it has extracted. Want to really drive home the point of just how significant it is to be able to use a tool like DD Rescue for this? This drive didn't read well, but you can see that in the DD Rescue View map, it went and scanned the entire drive once it realized it wasn't reading well and tried to prioritize the sections that it could read. So if you have a drive with some significantly bad sections, it will read all of the good data first and then go back and try and read the bad data later. And if the drive is failing and likely going to die in a set amount of time, that's going to get you the most data extracted possible. This is why it's so nice to be able to use this with modern software on modern computers. Now you'll notice down here in the DD Rescue output that this is reading between 300 and 500 kilobytes per second. The ATAboy is not fast. It runs at USB 1.1 speeds. On newer drives than this, and by new we're talking like 1 or 2 years, it will run at about 600 kilobytes per second at full tilt. This is not great for any drives that are bigger than, say, 2 gigabytes, but any drives that are bigger than 2 gigabytes are probably going to support LBA directly, so it won't really matter. Basically, if you think the speed of this is a problem, you should probably be using an adapter like this anyway. I do want to take a moment to point out here that the ATAboy is not an imaging utility. This is simply an adapter that lets you connect a drive like this to any computer. It doesn't actually do any imaging or anything like that. In the features and setup over here, there's mostly some minor compatibility things that I have not needed and some debug information. I actually have no idea what you would save or load to the EEPROM. I have not found that necessary at all. The main purpose of the ATAboy is to be able to use modern imaging utilities like this to read your vintage drives, which is absolutely fantastic. And there we are, 100% data recovered. And if I really wanted to, I could actually use one of my tools here and I could extract data from the hard drive. So there we go. That is everything read from the drive to my computer, and the ATAboy just works. Now, the thing is what doesn't work. Now, like I mentioned, I've actually done a lot of testing with this, and I have tried all of these drives with the ATAboy. I think I may have tried this one too, but these drives are all ones that I imaged with this. And let me bring over the JTS drive so you can see what that looks like and why I think the ATAboy is so important. Now I'm going to take this JTS Champion drive, model C2100-2AF, and I'm going to plug it in. I have reconnected to the ATAboy menu here. I will power the drive, and I will have it auto-detect. However, we can see that it is outputting some wonky stuff here, and the size is reported as, what is that? 131 terabytes. So this isn't working so well. The cylinders, heads, and sectors are also wrong compared to what's printed on the drive. Here's the thing. This drive is just dead. I brought this back to my office before recording this so that I could test it with a 46 board that had the correct kind of BIOS to be able to configure for this, and it read just as poorly on there. Matter of fact, we get the same kind of weird detection name printed during post. And this is where I become very team ATAboy, because of the 15 drives that I brought home to Image that were pre-LBA, 7 of them were dead. Now, 4 of them, these particular 4 drives here, all had some kind of issue where they would be kind of half recognized by both the ATAboy and that motherboard at the office. Neither one could read any of these. The other 3 drives that I had that are not here, I left at the office because they were fully hardware dead, and I just took them there to act as a load test for power supplies in the future. The reason I bring that up is because I'm still conflicted by the AI baggage that comes with the ATAboy. Now, I will say at this point, I have talked to JJ Dasher about that and asked him directly, why did he use the AI and what was it used for? The AI was used for the firmware that runs on this. The 3D printed case and the PCB design were all his own work. I also believe that the awards-ish GUI for it is his own work as well that the AI was not involved in. But there were a couple of reasons he turned to using the AI, which, to put in his own words, he hates that he used. The reason he stated was that he was actually trying to get help from other people to try and write the firmware and reached out and didn't get any responses. And he is currently clearing out a large warehouse and trying to downsize his collection. Now, trying to downsize and get rid of hardware like this will be a lot easier if you can image all of your drives and then wipe them before you send them off with a tool like this. So I can kind of understand using the AI stuff, but I don't really like it. But considering that I had so many of my drives die before I got to imaging them because existing imaging tools suck, it's hard for me to say that you shouldn't use this. And I'm going to consider this a situation where the enemy of my enemy is my friend, because I would rather use the ATAboy to just get my drives imaged, and especially using better imaging tools like DD Rescue, than let them all die like half of these ones that I tested with did. Now, I will end on a positive note. This entire project is open source. JJ Dasher does sell these himself, but you can also go build one yourself using the original sources. And he is open to receiving contributions to eliminate any AI elements of the firmware, including full rewrites. So there is hope for this to remove the AI baggage in the future. And if that happens, it is a 100% easy recommendation because it works extremely well. Well, I think that is everything about the ATAboy. It absolutely is the best early IDE imaging tool I have ever used, bar none. I am head over heels with the serial configuration menu for it not needing any software on the computer. Seriously, you can just plug it into any machine and then start imaging with it. That is awesome. I just hope that the one stain it has can be eliminated in the future so that it is the easiest recommendation ever. But I'm not going to delude myself. It's getting a lot more difficult now to go through life without using products that have had some AI involvement. If you want to comment on this video complaining about the AI, then your words will get fed into YouTube's training algorithm to generate automatically created replies that are given to every creator on the back end to make it seem like you're interacting with your audience when you really aren't. Gee, I wonder why people talk about the dead internet theory. So to say that I'm conflicted about the ATAboy is putting it mildly, but it does work, and it's the best tool that I've ever used for this. But that's going to be it for now. And if you enjoyed this video on old data archiving tools, you might want to check out some other videos on my channel that cover other devices like this. If you want to help support the channel, you can find me on Patreon, but for now, that's it, and I will see you next time.